think I found someone to produce my next album. His name's Vaughn Daniels.
It says he was tried for murder.
He was acquitted.
Hi, Amelia, how are you doing? Thanks very much for speaking to me.
Yeah, of course. How are you?
So first of all, congratulations on the movie. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I was in need of a werewolf movie, and definitely a different type.
Awesome. Yeah.
So, I mean, the first thing that interested me is, I mean, you didn't write this. I think the script came from someone who came to you along with the singer, no? Who wrote, who kind of came up with the idea together with the screenplay writer. Now, can you kind of explain a little bit how you became involved and how much they were involved once you became involved with the actual film?
Yeah, so I became involved like quite last minute, actually. I was finishing up my first feature and I was looking for some kind of friendly advice from another producer in Canada. And I was put in touch with Mike Peterson, who's one of the producers on Bloodthirsty. And he just happened to be looking for a director. So it was kind of like right place, right time sort of thing. And I assumed that they were still in development and that it would be like, you know, a couple of years, potentially, you never know with these things. And instead he's like, no, we're shooting in 2 months in Calgary. I live in Montreal. You know, do you want to read the script, talk to the writer, Wendy, who was one of the other producers as well. So I read it and I thought that it was a really interesting premise. And so then a month later I was in Calgary and we were shooting.
I mean, I'm surprised that you said that because it feels like a real, especially in terms of, I was reading an interview that Lowell had done about how she kind of came up with the idea. And it was very personal from her experiences as a singer-songwriter. And she was struggling with her sophomore album and it felt kind of very, very personal. So I was expecting you to say that you'd known her since you were like 3 years old, both of you, or something like that. So I was quite surprised that you told me that. Yeah,
they had been developing the idea for a couple years. So her and Wendy, Wendy is her mother and Will's her daughter. They'd been working on it for a couple years for sure. Different kind of iterations. And yeah, I think actually when I read the script, I immediately went and listened to Lowell's music. Right. Because I was really curious of kind of what the aesthetic would be of the music, but also it's a tough thing to get right in a film about music. So I just wanted to kind of see like what her songs would be like, knowing that she'd be writing them for the film. And once I heard it, I was like, okay, I feel like I get a better sense of like who this character is and I get a better sense of what they're going for.
Mr. Daniels.
I'm glad you're here, Greg.
This is my girlfriend, Charlie. Hi. I get the creeps. Since you got here, your music it's beautiful.
I can smell it all over you. And something primal. You need to use that.
How hands-on were the two of them? Because obviously this is very music-based. No, it centers around kind of the music industry and specifically the songs that they come up with in the film. That must have been, were they very hands-on, especially Lowell, in terms of the music, and actually filming those scenes, especially when the kind of when Gray is coming up with these new tracks, these new lyrics and these new songs.
Lowell wasn't really involved like with the shooting process, but she had provided all the songs in advance. So most of them were written before I came on board. A few were written during pre-production. For example, like Bloodthirsty was, which is interesting because that's like now the title song of the film. Yeah, and then my job was more just kind of like curating them and trying to figure out kind of what songs we hear when, and Wendy had done some of that work in the script, but I kind of revisited that stuff and worked with Lauren to kind of think about, you know, try not to repeat too much of each song. So we do hear the same song again. So could we hear a different part of the song to kind of show this progression as well? And for me, I really wanted to try to show the creative process on screen. And I'm not a songwriter, but obviously I'm familiar with being creative. And obviously it's not a film about music per se, so it's not necessarily like these details about what being in a studio would be like, but I wanted to get that sense of like a work in progress. So them writing music, because so much of the time in music films it's like they just write the song and it's already perfect and you're like, what the hell? So trying to feel like they were little bits and pieces of something that was going to be developed rather than kind of fully formed things. So I hope that came across, but that was my approach, was trying to show this like work in progress sort of feel.
I mean, you say it's not specifically about music. I mean, the actual werewolf element of the film is not so much about a kind of a beast in itself. It's more like a dissection of kind of human nature and kind of the social pressure that an artist kind of undergoes now, especially when they've just had like the first album of success and kind of they're just being thrown into the limelight. That kind of the element of feeling that this kind of this pressure and the beast that's inside Gray. No, it was something that the writers clearly wanted to delve into. Was that difficult for you to kind of film that as from a director's perspective with the script that they'd given to you?
I feel like my main thing when I read the script was really this idea of like, do you have to be a monster to be a successful artist? And obviously I don't believe that to be true, but I think it examines something interesting in artists, that it can be inherently selfish and you do kind of push people aside. And you know, you can be ambitious and self-involved to some extent. So I was trying to look at those more like kind of darker sides of that process. Yeah, for me, what was really key was just like working with Lauren, who plays Gray, and just like figuring out her arc from someone who is like less in control of her life at the beginning. And then at the end, she is in control, but obviously with these kind of devastating consequences. So yeah, I think that was really just like how to tell that through Gray's arc.
Mm-hmm. It must have been quite difficult, not just, I mean, from a director's perspective, but also from the actors. You mentioned there, Lauren. I mean, that this journey that she goes, it must have been very, very complicated for the both of you, because it's one that she, obviously there's something, I don't want to give anything away, but obviously there's something going on there, and she doesn't want to kind of give into it, but at the same time, she has to kind of let it take over and kind of give this impression that there is something going on with her. So that must have been really kind of a very difficult, tricky tightrope walk, no, for the two of you to get the right balance without taking it too far or not going far enough.
Yeah, I guess what struck me with the script that I really was excited to film was this juxtaposition of like her growing as an artist while also kind of becoming more monstrous, like literally. So yeah, I think that was kind of more the balance, was just like how the two are rooted together, how the progression of one thing, writing the album, is the like regression of her humanity, you know, and then those things kind of like coming to a head. So that's the main focus.
And then what about the relationship between Gray and Vaughn? That was also a very complicated relationship, because in the same, it's kind of, you can feel there's some kind of connection, but it's a strange connection that, and there's something kind of macabre going on there. You don't really know what's going on. So that must have been quite difficult for you, not just you to work out, but for you to work out with the two stars of the film as well, no?
Yeah, Vaughn is an interesting character. I feel like I was trying to find a balance of not making him too kind of, I don't know what the right word would be. Yeah, I guess so. Like, because he does help her in some ways, but I guess for her, he does incite something in her, but at the same time, she needs to kind of do it on her own. So he starts a process, but by the end, I feel like it's completely her own kind of creation. So that was kind of the main goal with that, was trying to balance that Vaughn does have an impression, but ultimately it's Gray's journey.
I suffer from hallucinations. I hallucinate that I'm turning into an animal.
Something else that Lowell said was that she was very happy with your casting. She was very happy that you kind of looked out there to find the type of characters that she wanted to be in the film.
Yeah, well, I knew both Lauren and Katharine, who plays Charlie, prior to making this film. I'd worked with Lauren one time before as a
in your previous film. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So Lauren, I knew I wanted to approach her because she's also, I knew she could sing, which was helpful for the film. And then she's also written some songs herself. So I knew she kind of was familiar with that songwriting process, which I think is really nice when actors can bring part of themselves to a role. Yeah, and then on top of that, you know, I knew that they were both queer performers, and I didn't want to let that be like an absolute rule in terms of casting for a gay couple, but it was definitely a priority for me. Talking to both of them, and from what I've seen myself, it sounds like a lot of times gay people don't necessarily get to play gay roles. And so I think it was a great opportunity to work with them. And I think they brought a lot of themselves to the table, and it's something that they've just talked about a lot and are very vocal about, which I think is really great. You know, this film isn't about queer identity, but I still think there's an authenticity to their relationship, which is important.
And because they're both queer actors, is that something that did they bring much to the table once they became involved? Was there anything that they thought needed maybe fine tuning a little bit just to suit the roles, maybe?
Yeah, I think definitely there was some choices I was thinking about that I consulted them on. I think in the script there was maybe a few more mentions of their sexuality, and I decided to not a lot, but a little bit. I decided to take that out kind of in consultation with Lauren and Katharine, because it just felt like I really wanted to treat it like they were any other couple.
Yeah.
And that's not to say you can't, there should be lots of films that also look at queer identity, but this wasn't one of them. So to me, it didn't seem relevant. Their queerness is there, but it's not a plot point. It's not like part of their character really, to some extent. Like it's not some like, trauma that's on them or anything.
Yeah,
like it's just like who they are.
Went with the boy, yeah, of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think for this particular film, that was my goal, was just like, it's no different. It's a horror movie with a couple in it, and that's just that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, something that's obviously we don't want to be any different is because it's a werewolf movie, a lot of horror fans will be going in there wanting what they always want, which is the werewolf effects and the transformation. I mean, obviously an American Werewolf in London kind of set the benchmark, and it's been very difficult to beat that. So it must have been quite a concern of yours going into, not to beat that because it's difficult to beat, but to kind of give something to horror fans and to werewolf fans that they were going to appreciate. Now, how did you tackle that?
Yeah, I definitely felt a lot of pressure as someone who loves that film and who does like werewolf movies. I knew going in, because it had already been kind of predetermined, that we were going to go for this more kind of like hybrid look and not necessarily like someone in a wolf hairy suit kind of thing, for budget reasons, but also to kind of embrace that and do something different. I'm a huge fan of American Werewolf in London, and I think what I really love about that transformation is like how painful it is. And it's not just like, now they're a werewolf. It's like you really feel like the body changing. Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge fan of like body horror and Cronenberg and stuff. So I really wanted to embrace that part of the transformation. And I also thought it was interesting that it takes place like in the recording studio where she's writing this album, but then, it finally all culminates in that space as well. So yeah, I think it was just a matter of kind of like using the limitations to be creative and working with Lauren to really feel the pain of the transformation, that it wasn't a nice experience, that it, really thinking about how her body is like shifting and changing.
Yeah.
What's wrong? You okay?
We're leaving. This place is doing something to you.
It's not this place.
You can't run away from your destiny.
I don't know who you are anymore.
So just to wrap up then, obviously you're promoting this one, and you've just recently done the previous film with Lauren as well. Has lockdown given you the chance to kind of sit down and think what will be the next step? What you're going to do? What you're going to be up to now? Or?
Not particularly. I think lots of people have found the pandemic difficult to kind of be creative. I guess also I made both these films quite quickly back to back, and then they were both released this year. So I think I'm still kind of processing those two projects and then kind of slowly thinking about what's next. But I can't say I've been particularly proactive for future projects during this lockdown time.
Uh-huh. But I mean, when you do take your next step, is it going to be something genre based, or are you going to try and do something else?
No, I imagine I would stay in the genre. I think horror is so massive in terms of what it can do, and it's really wide reaching, I think. So I think I would stay in the genre. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Amelia. It's been really good to speak to you, and I wish you the best of luck with the film when it comes out next week.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, take care. All the best then.
Too.
Bye now.